Imagine this. You wake up in the middle of the night, your room bathed in an unnatural stillness. The clock reads 3:17 a.m., and though you can't remember why, your heart is pounding. You feel it before you see it, a presence, something lurking, just beyond the edge of your vision. You turn your head, and there in the corner of the room stands a figure. It's familiar, almost human, but its edges blur like smoke, its face shifting between features you recognize and ones that make your stomach churn. It doesn't move, doesn't speak, but its gaze locks onto yours and you feel it. A cold, creeping realization that this thing knows you. Not just your name, not just your face, but the deepest, darkest corners of your mind. And then it whispers, not in words, but in a vibration that rattles your bones. You already know the truth. You've always known. You jolt awake, drenched in sweat, only to realize you're still in bed. The clock reads 3:17 a.m. This is no ordinary nightmare. It's a glimpse into the unsettling reality that most of us spend our lives running from. The truth that we are not who we think we are, that the world is not what it seems, and that the illusions we cling to are not just comforting lies, but necessary shields against a reality too horrifying to face. Why do we prefer the illusion over the truth? Why do we construct elaborate facades, both individually and collectively, to hide from what lies beneath? Is it because the truth is too painful, too alien, too monstrous? Or is it because deep down we know that once we see it, we can never unsee it? The answers lie in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. But beware, once you step into the darkness, there's no turning back. The figure in your nightmare is not just a figment of your imagination. It is a manifestation of something far more insidious, a truth so horrifying that your mind refuses to confront it directly. Instead, it cloaks it in symbolism, in half-formed images and sensations that hint at the abyss without forcing you to stare into it. This is the nature of the human psyche. It is a master of deception, both to others and to itself. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the part of ourselves we bury deep within, the repository of all the traits, desires, and memories we deem unacceptable. It is the embodiment of our darkest impulses, the parts of us we fear might be monstrous. But what if the shadow is not just a personal phenomenon? What if it is a collective force, a shared darkness that binds humanity together in a web of denial and delusion? Friedrich Nietzsche warned us of this when he spoke of the abyss. When you gaze long into the abyss, he wrote, the abyss also gazes into you. The abyss is not just a metaphor for the unknown. It is the void at the heart of existence, the realization that life is inherently meaningless, that our values and beliefs are constructs, and that the universe is indifferent to our suffering. To confront this truth is to risk madness, to feel the ground crumble beneath your feet as the illusions that sustain you dissolve into nothingness. And yet, we cannot help but be drawn to it. Like moths to a flame, we are fascinated by the very thing that terrifies us. This is the paradox of the human condition. We crave truth, but we are terrified of what it might reveal. We build elaborate systems of belief, religion, ideology, science, to shield ourselves from the void. But these systems are themselves illusions, fragile barriers against the encroaching darkness. Why do we do this? Why do we cling to lies, even when we know they are lies? The answer lies in the nature of fear itself. Fear is not just an emotion. It is a survival mechanism, a way of protecting ourselves from threats we cannot fully comprehend. But what happens when the threat is not external, but internal? What happens when the thing we fear most is ourselves? The horror of the truth is not just that it is terrifying, but that it is inescapable. It is the realization that we are not the heroes of our own stories, but the monsters. And once we see this, there is no going back. History is not just a record of events. It is a testament to humanity's collective refusal to face the truth. Consider the witch trials of the 16th and 17th centuries, where thousands of women were tortured and executed based on little more than superstition and paranoia, or the rise of totalitarian regimes in the 20th century, where entire populations were enslaved by ideologies built on lies and propaganda. These were not just acts of cruelty, they were acts of desperation, attempts to impose order on a world that seemed chaotic and meaningless. But the horror does not end with history. It is alive and well in the present, woven into the fabric of our daily lives. Think of the way we consume media, scrolling endlessly through curated feeds that show us only what we want to see. Think of the way we construct our identities carefully, crafting personas that hide our insecurities and flaws. Think of the way we interact with others, projecting our own fears and desires onto them, never truly seeing them for who they are. These are not just harmless habits. They are symptoms of a deeper sickness, a collective refusal to confront the truth. And the consequences are devastating. We live in a world where misinformation spreads faster than truth, where people are more likely to believe comforting lies than uncomfortable facts. We live in a world where mental illness is on the rise, where loneliness and alienation are epidemic, where the very fabric of society seems to be unraveling. Why do we do this to ourselves? Why do we cling to illusions even when they destroy us? The answer lies in the way our brains are wired. Cognitive biases like confirmation bias, the Dunning-Kruger effect, and the backfire effect all conspire to keep us trapped in our own delusions. We seek out information that confirms what we already believe. We overestimate our own competence, and we double down on our beliefs when they are challenged. But the real horror lies deeper still. It is the realization that these biases are not just flaws in our thinking. They are features designed to protect us from the truth. The human mind is not a truth-seeking machine. It is a survival machine, and survival often depends on deception. The question is not whether we can escape this horror, but whether we should. What would happen if we all woke up one day and saw the world as it truly is? Would we be liberated, or would we be destroyed? There is a way out of the nightmare, but it is not for the faint of heart. It requires a radical shift in perspective, a willingness to stare into the abyss and confront the truth, no matter how horrifying it may be. This is not a journey for everyone, but for those who dare to take it, the rewards are profound. Consider the story of Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor who found meaning in the midst of unimaginable suffering. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl describes how he was able to endure the horrors of the concentration camps by focusing on the one thing the Nazis could not take away from him: his ability to choose his own attitude. This is the essence of existentialism, the philosophy that we are free to create our own meaning in a meaningless world. But Frankl's story is not just about finding meaning. It is about facing the truth that life is suffering, that the world is cruel and indifferent, that we are all ultimately alone. And yet, it is only by facing this truth that we can transcend it. This is the paradox of awakening. The more we confront the darkness, the more we are able to find the light. It is like diving into the depths of the ocean, where the pressure is crushing and the light is faint, only to discover a hidden world of beauty and wonder. The darkness does not disappear, but it loses its power over us. How do we achieve this? Awakening. It begins with self-awareness, with the willingness to question our own beliefs and assumptions. It requires us to confront our own shadows, to acknowledge the parts of ourselves we have been hiding from. It demands that we let go of our need for certainty, our desire for control, our fear of the unknown. This is not an easy process. It is painful, disorienting, and often terrifying. But it is also liberating. When we stop running from the truth, we begin to see the world with new eyes. We realize that the illusions we have been clinging to are not just lies. They are prisons, keeping us trapped in a world of fear and delusion. And yet, even as we awaken, we must be careful. The truth is not a cure-all. It is a double-edged sword. It can set us free, but it can also destroy us. The key is to approach it with humility, with compassion, with a willingness to accept our own limitations. The journey is not for everyone, but for those who are willing to take it, the rewards are beyond measure. Here then is the ultimate truth, the revelation that ties all the horrors together, the final piece of the puzzle that makes everything suddenly, terrifyingly clear. The truth is this: we are not just afraid of the darkness. We are the darkness, the monsters we fear, the horrors we run from, the nightmares that haunt us. They are not external forces. They are us. They are the parts of ourselves we have disowned, the aspects of our nature we refuse to acknowledge. The figure in your nightmare, the one that whispered, "You already know the truth." It was not some external entity. It was you. This is the most chilling revelation of all, that the line between good and evil, between sanity and madness, between reality and illusion, is not as clear as we would like to believe. We are all capable of unspeakable acts of cruelty, of betrayal, of destruction, and yet we are also capable of incredible kindness, of love, of creativity, of transcendence. The horror lies in the realization that we are not one or the other, but both. We are the heroes and the villains of our own stories, the creators and the destroyers of our own worlds. And the illusions we cling to, the beliefs, the ideologies, the identities, are not just shields against the truth. They are the masks we wear to hide from ourselves. But here is the paradox. It is only by embracing this truth that we can truly be free. When we stop running from the darkness, when we stop pretending to be something we are not, we begin to see the world as it truly is. We realize that the horror is not something to be feared, but something to be understood. And in that understanding, there is a kind of peace. Not the peace of ignorance, but the peace of acceptance. The peace that comes from knowing that we are not alone in our darkness, that we are all part of the same human condition, struggling to make sense of a world that defies explanation. This is the ultimate truth, that the horror is not out there, but in here. And once we see it, once we truly see it, we can begin to heal.